Hi there, students! I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, because that's what I am. I'm a puppy sensei and I make Japanese language lessons to help you level up your abilities. Before we start this lesson, I want to say thank you to everyone who has reached out to me to share words of encouragement and support in the last week. One of the best parts about my lovely community is how understanding and compassionate you all are, and that really matters right now. Not just for me in my time of mourning, but for all of us. It seems like right now we are constantly getting bombarded with messages that are intended to divide us. And that just tells me that we have to work 100 times harder to draw together and support one another with love and kindness. I hope you know that you're all family now. You chose to be a part of my community, and that means that I choose to make you a part of my found family. I care about you, and I'm sending loving vibes and support always. Okay, so, I guess let's quickly discuss some logistical stuff, if you don't mind. I think we're kind of having some growing pains right now between these long-form lesson videos and my Pathfinder episodes. And we're giving some deep thought into different ways that we might consider how to handle the workload that goes into balancing these two different projects. From the start, my focus with this channel has always been on teaching Japanese. That's what I'm most passionate about. I see these lessons as the flagship of my work as a content creator. But now that Puppy-Sensei's Pathfinder Apocalypse has its legs under it, we're kind of contemplating what we want to do going forward. One option that we've been passing back and forth is to start putting out these longer lesson videos every other Friday, with a new episode of Pathfinder every other Saturday. The only thing that I don't want is to start putting out content inconsistently. I really need to have a schedule, because without a schedule, I know that I won't get anything done on time. That's kind of just the way my brain is hardwired. We are going to figure this out, but for the moment, I think that what we're going to do is we're going to aim for a PPA episode coming out every other Saturday, and a Japanese Lessons with Puppy Sensei episode coming out every other Friday. Let's see how it goes, but I'm definitely not against revising our strategy in the future based on what Manager-sama and I decide. Having said that, you are part of this equation too. I really care about what you think, so I always happily wait for any feedback that you might have, right? If there's some idea that you have about how I can make these lessons better, or my episodes better, or just my content in general, if you have ideas, I want to know. Okay, enough bant. Let's talk about Japanese numbers, okay? Let's get into it. Ikimashou! I'm going to break today's lesson down into 3 parts. First, we're going to do a bit of a quick review on numbers. We did an episode on numbers already. Was that around Halloween? I genuinely don't remember, but I think I made like some kind of little joke about how numbers are scary. Anyway, I think it's super important that we review what we already know about Japanese numbers from a high level. Secondly, we're going to discuss very large numbers in Japanese. Basically, I'm going to teach you to count to 1,000,000 and beyond. Unfortunately, infinity was not in our budget at this time. The final section for this lesson will be a discussion on counter words and their use in the Japanese numbering system. Now, that's going to be relatively brief. I want to do a much longer video on counter words at some point, but, you know. Anyway, if all of that sounded like nonsense to you, that's good. We're going to have fun today. Okay, to start with, let's do a quick review of what we already know about Japanese numbers. As you know, Japanese kanji are going to have an onyomi reading, a reading for that kanji that comes from the original Chinese pronunciation, and they will also have a kunyomi, or native Japanese reading. There is some very specific rules that will help us govern when to use the onyomi reading and when to use the kunyomi reading, but they are imperfect and you can't always trust them. For example, for nouns that are made up of kanji compounds, more than one kanji, you usually will be using the onyomi pronunciation, and for things like adjectives and adverbs, because they conjugate, you will usually be using the kunyomi. But as I said, even that isn't a universal truth or anything, so you got to be careful. Numbers will follow this same rule, right? So Japanese numbers have associated kanji and they will likewise have both a Sino-Japanese pronunciation and also a native Japanese pronunciation. And as we've discussed previously, you're going to use these different pronunciations in different environments. So let's start there. What are the Japanese kanji for 1 through 10? Okay, we're seeing it here. It's ichi, ni, san, shi, go, roku, shichi, hachi, kyu, ju. And then the kunyomi would be hitotsu, futatsu, mitsu, yotsu, itsutsu, mutsu, nanatsu, yatsu, kokonotsu, and to. Now, one thing to point out is 4, 7, and 9, as we've already talked about, are a little bit complicated just because you don't want to say shi, or you sometimes don't want to say shichi, or you sometimes don't want to say kyu. We've talked about all this stuff before, but I just wanted to give you this to provide you with a little bit of a reminder, right? So we're seeing all of these things here, right? Ichi, 1, hitotsu, ni, 2, futatsu, san, 3, mitsu, 4, 4, yotsu, go, 5, itsutsu, roku, 6, mutsu, shichi, 7, nanatsu, hachi, 8, yatsu, ku or kyu, 9, which is sometimes pronounced kokonotsu, and ju, 10, which is sometimes pronounced to, right? That's exactly what we saw before, and we've already gone through that twice now. Okay, so I'll explain more about these different pronunciations in a little bit, but for the moment, I really want you to focus on learning these kanji. They are pretty important ones, obviously. There's a reason that these kanji are among the first that anyone learns, whether you're a native speaker or a foreign language learner. Either way, these are super important and you should learn them pretty quickly. So if you don't have these kanji down, right, maybe pause the video, maybe come back to it in a few minutes, right? Try to memorize these, make some note cards, right? I think you can get it. There is a pattern to them and they're not so hard to learn, but I think you should try. Please, for me, try your best. One small but kind of important note that I would really like to add. Sometimes 1, 2, 3, and 10 are going to be written using different kanji. They'll be pronounced the same, but they're going to look like this, right? So we have ichi, ni, san, and ju, and they're going to be written in these official kanji that look a lot different, a lot more complicated. Why is it like this? Well, these are sort of obsolete kanji that used to be used for official Chinese documents. They're still sometimes used for different kinds of important documentation in Japanese, and we actually used to have more. Right now it's just kind of pared down to 1, 2, 3, 10, but it used to be 1 through 10 had their own independent, special, very complicated kanji. You're not usually going to see these in literary or everyday uses, but I think it's really good to recognize them since you really might see these numbers if you have to fill out like a government document form or something like that. They might use the official kanji, right? The normal one is just more simplified. It's what people use in everyday life, and so that's what people are used to. Now, previously I taught you that when we're making higher numbers than 10, we really just simply squish them together, right? So ju ichi, that's 11 because it's ju and 1. It's 10, 1, ju ichi. Ne? Niju is 20 because it's ni and 10. It's 2, 10, niju. Ne? And so that together, you squish them together and it becomes 20. You can kind of think about it as similar to Roman numerals or something like that, because basically you're going to want to always keep things together. How many tens do you have? How many ones do you have? And then later today, we'll be thinking about how many hundreds you have, how many thousands you have, etc. Right? Yeah. So this should make really good sense to you. Yeah? We're just squishing numbers together. And that's why Rokuju is 69, right? Because it's 6, 10, 9. Knew that was coming. We also learned hyaku last time. Hyaku is the Japanese word for 100. But honestly, this was always intended just as a very brief review, so if you want a more in-depth look back at these numbers, check out my first video on numbers, link in the description, like and subscribe. YouTube stuff, very important for me, helps me out a lot. I appreciate it. So today I'm going to start teaching you about these higher numbers. I think it's going to be relatively simple because I don't really want to spend an entire lesson really just teaching you how to count to 1,000,000 and beyond. Although, if I'm being entirely honest, that's basically exactly what we're going to end up doing today anyway. The very easy thing is that 1 to 10,000 really isn't all that different from what we've already learned before, right? Just as I said, we are kind of just sticking numbers together to form bigger numbers. So take a look at this. Okie dokie. So this is 138. What number is that? It's 100, and then it's 3, and then it's 10, and then it's 8, right? So if we think about counting things, it's 100, and then 310 is 30, and then it's 8, so it's 138, right? That's easy, isn't it? You're just sticking numbers together, and you end up just with kind of a sequence that's relatively straightforward and easy to figure out, I think. Now, the only thing that's even just a little bit tricky about hyaku is that hyaku will change its pronunciation based on the number of hundreds that you have, right? So based on the number that comes before it, the pronunciation for hyaku is going to change just a little bit, right? So we already had hyaku, which is 100, right? And then we have nihyaku. Then we have sanbyaku, byaku, right? Notice how that turns into a B, yeah? 400, 500, 600, 600. It turns into a P with a little stop before it. And then we have 700, then we have 800, right? Looks exactly like 600. 600 and 800, they look a little bit different, right? 800 with a P sound. And then we have 900. I've highlighted the ones that are just a little bit weird, but it's basically 300, 600, and 800, and they just sound slightly different. There's also another word, nanbyaku. Nanbyaku, that's the nan from nani plus hyaku, right? Nanbyaku, that means something like hundreds of things, right? Some number of hundreds. And that follows the exact same pattern as sambyaku, right? We can see that. That's just because both san and nan both end in an an sound, right? It's that an sound. So anything that ends an byaku is going to become a B sound. So, with that in mind, I want to ask you, how would you say this number? How would you say this? Can you figure it out? This isn't a quiz or anything, that comes later, but, I just thought I would try to get some class participation in here. Make sure y'all aren't asleep. Anyway, it's 395. ね、395ですね。That's 395. Again, I don't think that's too difficult. It follows all of the rules that we've outlined so far. So, I feel good moving on to the thousands. All right, here is... Wait. That doesn't make sense. Oh, I see the mistake I've made. Hold on. Sorry about that. I had to spirit away some stuff there. Anyway, this is sen, 1,000. And we're going to see a similar pattern that we saw with hyaku. Some cases will exhibit that sound change. Here's how we pronounce sen in various different situations. Isen. We'll talk about this more in a moment. Nisen. Sanzen. Right? Notice that it became a Z sound. Sanzen. Yeah? Sanzen. Yonsen. Gosen. Rokusen. Sometimes rokusen. Ne? Nanasen. Hassen. Yeah? We've kind of created a small stop between ha and sen. So it's not hachi sen, it's just hassen. And then kyusen ですね。1000、2000、3000、4000、 5,000, 6,000, or 6,000, 7,000, not 7,000. We definitely do not want to say 7,000. That's not a word. 8,000 and 9,000. All right, so that interesting thing about isen, right? Isen and sen are kind of interchangeable. They both kind of mean 1,000 if sen is on its own. So take a look at this example that I'm giving you here. So we have 1,578. Ne? And we also have 1,578. Ne? All right. So how are these two different? Really, they kind of aren't. They're not particularly different. In the case that uses isen, it's just more exact and more specific. It's the difference between saying, I have 1,000 kompeto versus I have 1,000 kompeto. Gods, I wish. Anyway, sen works exactly the way we expect it to, right? It follows all the same rules that we've established so far. It's just kind of stringing things together. We're just squishing these different numbers together to create bigger numbers. Okay, let's be honest here. I know it's not actually that easy. Japanese numbers are hard and confusing, and if you've already been scratching your head and feeling a little bit uncomfortable, I understand. I know that numbers can be really intimidating and a bit overwhelming. I know when I was early in my journey with this language, I used to freeze up when I would need to read Japanese numbers. I know that it's way more stressful than I'm making it sound, but, I don't want to overwhelm you. So I'm trying to downplay it a little bit so you don't feel too intimidated. The reality is I cannot do a full lesson where I just count to 1,000,000 because I don't think anybody wants that. The point is, it's okay. It's gonna be okay. We're going to get through this together, okay? So please let's just take a breath and calm down, and then we'll just calmly learn something new, okay? Just calmly. Panic! Okay, so once you get to 10,000 in Japanese, you start counting by 10,000s. Not counting by thousands, but counting by 10,000s. We have a word in Japanese, sen, for thousands, but then when you get to 10,000, it becomes man, which is a counter for numbers of 10,000s. And if I'm being entirely honest with you, it hurts my little head to think about that. I guess the good news is that we don't have any sound change here, but I do think that the heckin' difficulty level really got ramped up like crazy for us here. So, look at this number. 15,821. Do you see why this is so unsettling to me? Because the English translates as 15,000. But in English, that's like 15 sets of 1,000. It's 15 times 1,000. But in the Japanese, it's one set of 10,000 plus 5 sets of 1,000. And that is upsetting. It feels way too complicated for me. But it's whatever. That's what we have to deal with. And before you ask, no, you cannot just say 15,000 for 15,000s. I'm getting all upset. I need to take a puppy breath. Did you know that today is the last day of Frustration February? Oh, also, remember before when I said with sen that you can either use sen or isen for 1,000 and it's not particularly different? Well, you can't do that with man. So it's going to be ichiman for 1/10,000 and niman for 2/10,000s and sanman for 3/10,000s. You need the counting word even when you only have one set of 10,000. But I think it gets even more confusing when you go into even higher numbers because we then get 10,000,000, which is 100,000. And then we get 100,000,000, which is 1,000,000. And then we get senman, which is 10 million. And then we get oku, which is 100 million. And then you would count up by numbers of oku. Yeah, that's right. You count up by sets of 10,000, not by 1,000, but sets of 10,000 until you get to oku, which is 100 million. And then you start counting up by 100 millions. Do you see it now, Mr. Krabs? Do you see why this puppy dislikes Japanese math? It's so frustrating. Now, listen, okay? We have already done a lot today. Heck, I already feel exhausted. And if you're already confused about Japanese numbers by this point, I seriously do not blame you. Japanese numbers feel very arbitrary, but we must persevere. We must keep going. Taisetsu desu! It's important. But because we've already covered a lot, I'm going to keep this kind of brief. Consider this a preview of coming attractions. So the last thing that we're going to talk about today is going to be just a few small things about Japanese counterwords. I really want to do a longer lesson on counterwords in the future, but it's such an extremely broad topic that I honestly cannot in any way fit everything that I want to say into just a single lesson. I'm telling you, these things are very obtuse. We've talked a bit about counterwords in the past, and I've told you that Japanese has so many counterwords that there are entire dictionaries that just teach you how to count things. It's a bit rough, and even I forget what kind of counterwords to use when counting certain different kinds of things. Like, take for example these two counterwords. We have two example sentences here, and they are ushi ni to ga imasu and inu ni hiki ga imasu. This is a typical way that we're going to use counters in Japanese. The two counters that we're seeing here are to and hiki. To is commonly used for heads of big animals. Cows, bulls, hippopotamus. Hiki is used for like pets or smaller animals. But where do you draw the line between those? What about like a really, really big dog? What about giant cats like tigers? What about like a pet goat? Are pet goats counted using hiki or to? It's both. It's either one. As confusing as that is, goats can be either. But I bring up this point because I think sometimes it's really hard to know which counter to use in which different situation. It's just a very complicated system. And if I'm being honest, I've spoken to Japanese people and they kind of agree that this system in particular kind of makes no sense. But I will remind you, as I talked about in the previous video when I talked about numbers, we have this too, right? We use weird counting words for like different herds of animals, like a murder of crows, right? Where did that come from? And I think we can look at that too and go, that's a little bit silly, isn't it? Why do we need that? It's, I don't know why we need a word like murder of crows. It doesn't matter. Basically, what I'm showing here is the common way that these counters end up getting used, right? And so the basic formula for their use is going to be like noun, number, and counter. So it would be things like neko ni hiki, 2 cats. Chippu gomai, 5 chips. Kuruma yondai, 4 cars. However, there's actually another way that we can use these counterwords. The other format, which is relatively similar and ultimately means basically the same thing, is going to look like this. It's going to be number, counter, no, noun, right? So basically in this format, we're counting some number of nouns. It sort of looks like this. So I've got 2 sentences here. One is, biru sonbon ga arimasu. And the other is, sanbon no biru ga arimasu. And they both kind of mean there are 3 bottles of beer. So why are they different? Basically, biru sonbon means 3 beer bottles, and sanbon no biru means 3 bottles of beer, right? Okay, at least that part makes sense, I hope. There are a couple of other edge cases that are going to end up being slightly more complicated, but these are the common 2 ways that we're going to end up using these counters. As I've said before, there are so many counters. In Japanese, there are sort of 500 various types of counters that we're going to see on occasion, but I mean, a lot of those are quite rare. If you're really interested, at some point I'll do an entire lesson where I just talk about every one of the Japanese counter words, even the ones that are really, really super rare. But really, that's kind of just the point that I wanted to cover in this lesson. I was really just reminding you how these counters end up getting used and thinking about how we use them even with big numbers, because that's also something that we can do. Okay? So, all right, moving on. Why don't we take a look at some quiz? Let's do a numbers quiz. Bango quizu, bango quizu, bango quizu. For today's quiz, I'm going to give you some numbers in Japanese, and what I want you to do is basically just give me the number in English, right? So we're going to start with just trying to really just simply identify these numbers. They're not particularly simple numbers, right? But I'm going to show you the Japanese. You identify the number in English. That should be pretty easy because really all you have to do is read the kanji and string the numbers together. Wait! Puppy-Sensei, did you say read kanji? You want us to read kanji? Yeah, I totally do, but you'll be fine. Number kanji are pretty simple. All right, let's just get started and we'll see how you do, okay? Here's the first one. Okay, did you get it? I hope this was easy for you. It's 6,746. You can say it like 6,746. Want to do a harder one? Yeah, of course you want to do a harder one. I'm so proud of you. Let's try together, okay? 2番, number 2. All right, so this was a bit harder, right? How did you do? It's 98,102. And we'll say 98,102 ですね? Yeah, it's not too bad. I don't think it's too terribly difficult at all. Yeah? We'll get there. If you're feeling overwhelmed, it's going to be fine, I promise. All right? We'll just keep practicing together. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. How would you read it? 3番です. This one is 5 million. 500万. Are you confused by that? It's 500 10,000s. 1 man is 10,000, and we want 500 of those man, right? So 510,000. 500 times 10,000 is 5 million. Another way to look at this is that it's 5,000 thousands, right? But in Japanese, we already know that we count by 10,000s. I know that feels tricky, but that's why we're practicing. And again, I'm proud of you for trying. All right, 4番. I don't think this one is particularly tricky, but the issue here is really in noticing the difference between man and hyaku. Notice with man, we need that ichi in the front, right? It needs to be ichiman for 1 10,000. But we don't need to specify that it's 1 hundreds. So it's 10,179. 11,179 ね. All right. 5番. Okay, this one was 41,015. That's 41,015. All right? Do you see why, right? It's 4 sets of 10,000, 1 set of 1,000, and then 15. Yeah? You're doing great. Let's keep at it. Rokuban. Big number go brr. Too much? Are you overwhelmed? Ichioku is 100 million, right? Ichioku, 100 million, right? And we count by 100 millions, right? So Ichioku is one of those 100 millions, but something like Go-oku would be 500 millions, right? We're kind of treating that oku and all of these other sort of number words, these high number words, they end up sort of behaving like counters, like we talked about earlier. Anyway, yes, you do actually have to specify ichioku here. So it is ichioku 100 million. And so the number is 100,005,102. Ichioku 5102. Ne? If you're ever really having trouble with these very, very large numbers in Japanese, just split them up, right? So this is honestly just 100 million and then 5,102, right? So if you kind of split them apart, I think it makes it a little bit easier to digest these numbers. Don't forget, make things as easy as possible on yourself, okay? No one is going to judge you if it takes you a little bit longer to read numbers, and no one can see into your brain. So if in your head you have to split these things apart, no one's going to know. Big numbers really are intimidating. There's a reason that math fear is a thing. 7番. Oh ho, I see you like sevens. I am also a fan of the Final Fantasy series. Anyway, this is 77,777,777. 7777,7777. It's hard to say. It's too many nana. I'm proud of you. I know numbers can be a little intimidating, but I'm really happy that you tried to do your best. Great job. Keep it up, okay? For homework this week, would you try to give me the Japanese pronunciation for these numbers? I'm going to give you the kanji. You just try to pronounce them. And, you can also tell me the English if you want, because I'm not providing you that too. You can write your answer out in the comments section of this video, if you'd like. If you have hiragana support on your computer, try typing out the full pronunciation in hiragana. If you don't have Japanese language input on your computer, please tell me if you're interested, and I could totally do a video that shows you how to get that on your computer or how to get that on your phone or, whatever you would like. I'd like to teach you how to do it, but I don't know if there's too much interest in knowing how to establish Japanese language support, If you wanted to do like input support and you want me to show you how to do it, I'll do that. Anyway, so homework. Try to figure out how to pronounce this giant number. That honestly kind of makes my head hurt a little bit. Good luck. Yikes. All right, so thank you for stopping in for today's lesson. Like I said in the intro, I'll let you know what we end up deciding to do with these lessons, but I do believe that these long-form lessons are likely to be moving to every other Friday, and we'll probably try to stay on that kind of a schedule. That's probably better just for my mental health and everything else anyway. I really want to get out as much content to you as I possibly can, but, maybe without breaking myself down into little pieces of puppy kibble in the process. We'll see how it goes, and we'll reassess and reevaluate. That's important too. In the meantime, I'm sending you love and care and kindness. If you ever need anything, just reach out to me on Discord, okay? Alright, until next time, mata ne!